Hey guys, it's Sal from House of Gaia Pythons. So in today's video, I just wanted to actually talk about how I got into the hobby. So I'll just kind of go over my backstory and how I originally got into it, and then how I kind of fell out of it and came back into it again. So I hope you enjoy the video, and let's get it started. So I got my first ball python in 2008. So after I'd got my first ball python, shortly after that, I believe I moved out a couple years later. Obviously fell in love with snakes in general. Like I said, I've always liked reptiles, so it kind of started there for me. And then from that point on after that, I had wanted to move into something a little bit bigger. So I decided to get a pair of boas. So from these boas, we, at the time, like I'd done enough research, but you know, we ended up putting them into the same enclosure. And I know that's not typical husbandry with snakes. You want to keep them separate generally. For us, it worked because the enclosure was massive. It was an 8-foot by 3-foot by 2-foot enclosure. It was a tank. We had heat spots on individual sides, a large water dish in the middle, and then we also had a cool area in between those spots. So they each had their own zone. They would typically, to be honest, they would typically go under the same hide on one side, but they would also go to each other's hides once in a while. So we thought nothing of it. There was no intent to breed them or anything like that. We knew that the possibility was there, of course, but I had always read that boas were super difficult to breed, you know, especially if you're not putting any effort forth into it. Well, lo and behold, in 2000, I believe it was 2010, yes, 2010, we had our first litter of boas. I was super excited. You know, like I said, it was kind of random. We had no idea that the female was gravid. So I came down one morning and had noticed there's something moving, and when I looked closer, I noticed it was a baby boa. So I was absolutely just shocked and super happy. It was one of the coolest feelings I've ever experienced, still to this day. And right away, we basically kind of rushed to figure out like what the best step was to do. Got them all settled in, separated and stuff like that, and off we were. And at that point, you know, it was more of like a shock, excitement kind of feeling. So immediately, as soon as everything was settled, I had started doing more and more research, which will bring us to the next point here. And I noticed after their first shed that two of the boas looked quite different. Most of the other boas in the litter looked pretty similar. Obviously there were slight differences in each one, but two of them were very dark, and one of them almost had this like kind of lavender look to it. So as soon as I saw that, I went on and searched under genetics for boas and stuff like that, because I was starting to get really interested. I was like, why does this one look so different? Why are these darker? You know, at that time I didn't really know too much about you know, different genetics in terms of boas. So as I looked further into it, I started realizing that there were different traits brought on by these genetics. So you know, I started diving kind of deeper, and I'm not sure what ended up happening, but I ended up going towards ball pythons and checking out some genetics towards them, and then that's when I really started realizing how many different genetics there even were back then. You know, seeing albinos and Mojaves and bumblebees, stuff like that, where I was just like, wow, that's insane. Like, I'm so used to the normal ball python. And at that point, I think maybe I'd seen maybe pastel or orange ghost at the stores and stuff like that. So I knew they were around. I didn't know the extent though. And that kind of brought me towards the ball python hobby. I had started looking up ball pythons on YouTube, and of course immediately, like I'm sure a lot of you started with, I went to Snake Bites TV with Brian Barczyk, and that was like kind of my step in the door of seeing how many amazing morphs there were, and just this, like, at the time what I was like, there's like an underground world of ball python breeders basically, and like all this stuff is happening and I had no idea. So you know, it started with Brian Barczyk for sure, and then that kind of brought me into seeing Brian Gundy and Ralph Davis, and those three YouTube channels really heavily brought me into ball pythons and got my foot in the door. And they kind of, after, because I think that was about 11 years ago or so, maybe 10 years ago actually, that I started watching them, and I think it was just when they started. I'm pretty sure Brian Gundy and Brian Barczyk kind of started around the same time on YouTube, and I remember like they didn't have that many videos out when I started watching them, so it was a long time ago. I know Ralph Davis had videos prior to that for sure. But yeah, those three guys definitely got me into it, and after watching them for so long, that's what started getting me into Garrick DeMeyer, and then Billy Rose from Mutation Creation as well. And then those two guys, I mean, Garrick and Billy have really, you know, after I started watching their channels, that's what really started to push me into ball pythons. I ended up going out and picking up a rack, and I bought a female Mojave and a male bumblebee at the same time. I still remember when I saw that male bumblebee in person, I was absolutely blown away, guys. Like, it's so crazy to think about that now because of all the crazy genetics we have going on and all the crazy combos, but I still remember seeing that bumblebee in person, and I was like, it just seems so unreal to me. I couldn't believe that I had it. And I just knew instantly once I got those two, I was like, okay, this is, I know myself, and usually when I get into something like that, I go pretty hard, pretty fast into it.
That's what she said.
So I knew I was gonna pick up. So as soon as I got those two home in the rack, they were settled. 2 weeks later, I ended up finding a female Enchi and a female spider, which I also brought home. At that moment, when I had those 4 snakes, I had started knowing in my head already, I was like, well, because I had that luck with the boas, but everything was fine. That litter of boas did awesome. We had 13 babies the first year. They all did absolutely great. They all shed great. They were eating fine. Everyone was healthy. My adult pairing was doing great. They were eating immediately, of course, because they're boas, but they were doing good. And yeah, so that kind of started it off. I think it was about 2011. I had decided that I wanted to pursue breeding ball pythons. I wanted to give it a try and see how I would go with it, if there was something that I would be into like I was with the boas. So I started slowly growing my collection at that point. So in 2012, I ended up getting another litter of boas. So this time, because we knew in 2010 that it was possible, we kept everything the same. I didn't want to switch anything because I knew at that time boas were hard to breed, or harder to breed than ball pythons. So we kept everything the same, had another successful clutch in 2012, and everything went fine. I mean, I sold off most of the babies from the initial litter except for those 2 that I was talking about. Also, I didn't go over that lavender purpley boa in my thumbnail. That was one of the boas that I kept back. And it did get more purple as it aged. Unfortunately, when it got to, I think it was 2012, I was 2 years old. I think it was actually closer to when my second litter came out. The lavenders started to turn a little bit more black.
I see a red door and I want it painted black.
Not quite like IMG does, but it was similar. Like, it was a similar effect. A lot of stuff started turning black. No presence of IMG in anything else, obviously. So still have no idea to this day what was going on with that girl, but she was absolutely gorgeous. So I was happy to have her. So at this point in my collection, I think I was at about 40 or 50 ball pythons. I had a really old school Freedom breeder rack, really old school one. It was awesome. I wish I didn't get rid of that baby, but that's okay. That's kind of coming up as to what happened. But so anyways, we got more into ball pythons. I think, like I said, I had 40 or 50 ball pythons at this point. Now most of these ball pythons that I had purchased back in 2011, 2012, I did purchase as hatchlings. Back then, getting proven breeder females, even like a proven breeder female Mojave, was hard to find at that time. Not hard to find, but they were much pricier than they are nowadays. So I raised all my hatchlings up until this point, and I had at least 12 or 15 females who were just reaching that point. And you have to remember, back then, around that time, it was the understanding and the norm was that you shouldn't be breeding females before they hit 1,500 or 1,600 grams at minimum. So it did take 2 or 3 years at least to get these females to that size. I never power feed or anything like that. I was always feeding once a week like I normally do. So I just got all these females to that size. I had my first clutch in 2015. It was my only clutch, and it was a pied het MJ Exanthic to a double het female. So I was like super stoked, obviously. I was like, man, I could get lightning pies on my first clutch, which is insane. Unfortunately, the clutch didn't make it.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
So it went bad in the incubator. It was absolutely devastating to me because at this point I had waited pretty much 3 years to get my first clutch. I raised everything, mostly everything from a hatchling. So it was quite devastating for me. And then unfortunately that same year I went through a divorce and pretty much sold off my collection because I had such a sour taste from losing that clutch and just going through everything in life, having a kid and going through divorce and all that stuff. So it was a difficult time. So unfortunately I did sell off my collection. At that point wasn't really sure if I was ever going to come back into it or not. So we're jumping from 2015 when I sold everything off up to 2019. You know, I really miss just having I miss having snakes in general, like not even just the breeding side of it. At this point I was really missing just having snakes around, and I was slowly kind of getting back into it. And then last year me and my wife talked, and she was like, because I talked to her and I was like, I really want to get into breeding ball pythons again, and this time I really want to go hard on it because I missed it so much. You know, I miss the hobby, I miss going to shows, man, I miss going to shows. Like it sucks so much with COVID right now. Like it's one of the things I really truly miss. So going back and, you know, talking to people about ball pythons and just reptiles in general, I do really miss that. So I'm really excited to hit that up again. Anyways, so we talked about it, and she was absolutely fine with me starting, which was awesome. And then I got right back into it, and now you know, my setup is much better than before. The only thing I do miss is that old Freedom Breeder rack. I wish I would have hung on to that thing, but that's life. All right, guys, I know this video is super long. For anyone who actually stuck around, I'm glad you stuck around and listened to my story. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope it wasn't too boring. I will try to make some more videos with showing off some more snakes and stuff here, because I know I've done a couple now with no snakes in the video. Boo.
Saying boo or boo-earns? I was saying boo-earns.
So yeah, hopefully we can do that. Anyways, I hope you guys have a good day. Please don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. It means a lot, man. And we'll talk to you guys later.